guys, it's Natasha, pronounced Natasha. I'm back again with the 5th book in my Not Good Girl series, video series, which means that yes, we can finally talk about Adrian and everything that happened with him. So we're going to talk about Outside Edge today. If you have read this book, first of all, thank you so much for getting this far in the series and also for taking a chance on Adrian. There were a few people that when I said that I was writing a book for Adrian, they were kind of like, what, why? And we'll get into that. But first, if you have not read this book, go and do it now. I will wait. Okay, now that you've read the book, what'd you think? Because honestly, this is one of my favorite books. I know I said, lots of people tell me Stand Up Guy is one of the best books you've ever written, but honestly, this one's a big contender. I have a lot to say about this book, so I might go kind of fast again. Sorry about that. But I also wrote myself a list just so that I wouldn't forget, so I might be referring to that. So yeah, why did I write this book? Why did I write a book about Adrian, who ended up doing some really bad things in Stand Up Guy? I'm assuming you already know that because you've read all the way up here. You've read Outside Edge, so spoilers. I wrote it because I really believe, first of all, in a good redemption story, and I believe in that in real life, but also in stories it's easier to get away with. But of course, there was also, I felt like his story never got tied up. I left a bit of a loose end after Stand Up Guy, and even though I very briefly mentioned him in Ringside, there wasn't much more to it. And somebody had actually even mentioned to me, like, hey, we didn't really find out what happened to Adrian. I said, I don't really know what's going on with him. So I decided to check in with him and see how he was going. And as you know, everything was going really poorly for him. Because of his own life decisions, of course. But anyway, so we've got Adrian dealing with, of course, the alcohol abuse that we didn't know about previously, even though it was kind of hinted at in Stand Up Guy. But of course, there's a bit of a difference and a bit of a blurry line between, hey, we're all out at a party and drinking, even though we're underage, and also being addicted to alcohol. And of course, we find out that Adrian was, and Adrian struggles against it, and he doesn't want to admit that he was, but he absolutely was. And then, of course, he meets Brooke, and Brooke, not only is she dealing with a lot of disappointment in her life, and of course, later on, we find out about her own issues with substance abuse, but she's also got a lot of depression, and she's she was stressed out, and I think she was probably a lot burned out as well. And if you're a writer watching this, you probably know what burnout feels like. And of course, there's a lot of mental health issues that come about being somebody who forces themselves to be the best that they can be and takes it to the extreme and goes over the edge. Then there's a lot that is associated with that. So we've got these two characters. And I just want to say, before I get into some of the specifics of what I loved about this book, I really hope nobody read this book and thought that I think true love conquers all. I mean, in a way, sure, that's very romanticized, that ideal, but true love or falling in love isn't the cure for mental health issues. It won't cure depression. It will not cure substance abuse or addiction. It is not a cure. But you can still fall in love despite those things. And I think, I hope that you also thought that Adrian and Brooke are a good example of how two people who are overcoming their own issues separately can still find it in themselves to feel lovable and also to love as well. Bit similar to how Red also, discovered that he is capable of that, being loved and also loving. Adrian finds that he is too. And we find out, even Red points it out, but we find out Adrian and Red are very much alike in some ways. So there's that aspect of it. And I kind of wanted to pull that aspect out and say, like, yeah, there is this, they have a lot of flaws, and both of them on both sides. But that doesn't mean that they can't find love. So yeah, it's not a cure, but you can still be in love despite those things. And I think that's very true in real life, as it is in books. But I didn't want it to be a book where, they solve their problems by being together, which, isn't what happened, and I hope that you felt that way too. But anyway, let's move on from that. So we've got Adrian, who obviously we see him, he doesn't want to admit that he's an alcoholic, but the thing that makes him realize that is when they get close to Halloween. And we find out that in last year's Halloween, where Ellie and Julian ended up going to a party with Cherry and Adrian as well, but they were dressed like gladiators because they'd been at a boxing thing, and Adrian was pretty upset about that. And he admits in Outside Edge, and we don't know this in Stand Up Guy, but he admits in Outside Edge that after Ellie left because he was pushing her too hard, he got a little drunk and made out with some other girl. And then we know, of course, all the stuff that happened with the rumors and everything after they broke up. But he also says what actually happened was he and his friend got drunk, and he says his friend was making all kinds of assumptions, and he just let him assume whatever, because as we know, people who are hurt do stupid things. And Adrian eventually comes around to, admitting that is what happened to him. That was his experience, and it's not a good excuse. And I think he knows that, and he feels very badly about it. But that is what happened. So I like that we got to see, again, in this series, there are a lot of things that we kind of see in retrospect from a different character's perspective. I'm sorry, I know I'm speaking too fast, but it is what it is. I'm trying to keep this video as short as I can. But yeah, seeing previous events from different characters' perspectives is kind of an interesting thing for me. So we get to see what exactly was going through Adrian's mind through that whole experience. And I don't know, even at the end of the book, I still don't know if he ever forgave Julian for kind of taking his girl from him, but he at least comes to terms with it, and he's got someone new now anyway, right? So there's that. And then we have Brooke. And Brooke was on track to be at the Olympics for ice dancing or figure skating, whatever way you want to call it. They are technically two separate things, and I researched both of them. But anyway, so she was going to be going for skating, but what happened was she didn't pass a drug test because she'd been taking too many stimulants. And later on in the book, she actually admits to Adrian that after that, she tells him it's a bit of a slippery slope, right? She'd been taking them legitimately to try to help her out with keeping up her stamina or whatever it was. And then when she got the news that she would not be going to the Olympics, she said that she tried to OD, which is a pretty heavy topic, and I didn't get too deep into that, but she admits that to him, and that's a thing that concerns him, of course. And I've taken a lot of mental health training, and I've done a lot of research, and we know that it's a typical thing where if somebody's tried once, they'll probably try again. And I don't know if Adrian knows that or not, but of course it concerns him, which leads to the climax. But I'll get to that in a minute. So we've got these two characters trying to figure their own things out, and they're both going to these get dry meetings. So meanwhile, Brooke's been roped into helping out with the Christmastown pageant. Christmastown, by the way, isn't a real place, but there is a place in Ontario called Noelville, based on Christmastown. So I took that name and I made it my own, and shout out to the 5 of you who live up in Noelville, Ontario. I'm sure there's more than 5 of you. I'm sorry. It's small town stuff. So anyway, so Christmastown, there's the big pageant that they do on ice. Brooke is helping out because obviously she's qualified to be helping, and Adrian gets roped into it too to serve some of his community hours. And I know when I started writing it, I was like, I don't want this to be the exact same thing that happened with Red, where Red was very reluctant to learn how to dance because of his image, but rather Adrian actually kind of he liked doing it because I think he feels very comfortable on the ice, and it's like his home, right? So even though he's not playing hockey, I mentioned this in a couple of other videos, but I don't hate hockey players, and I hope this book proved that to you. But anyway, so he's very comfortable on the ice, and even though he's reluctant to do anything, I think when he sees Brooke doing what she can do, he rises to the challenge, because first of all, he's just he's a competitive person, but also because he thinks that he can do it and he's not afraid to try it. And he doesn't think that it'll make him look any different because he really doesn't care what anybody thinks anymore. I think he starts to care less and less about things in general, which actually works to his advantage in this respect. So that's kind of interesting. And then, of course, we see, I talked about the scene where he admitted to his Get Dry group that what happened during Halloween. And then, of course, after that, Brooke asks, she says, go for a drive with me. And she asks him about Ellie, and he tells her all about meeting her. And we see a little bit about what happened in Knockout Girl and Stand Up Guy after that and everything that happened. And I guess they were both feeling the moment, and she leaned in to kiss him, and he didn't kiss her back, and she's pretty hurt by that, which, of course, I feel like anybody might be, but it was probably exacerbated by her mental health issues, by her depression, and generally just feeling rejected by everybody at that point, so... I felt really bad doing that to her. Like, that was, Adrian is a guy who would probably never turn away a kiss from a girl he liked, but then he did from her because he claims that he doesn't want to repeat the same pattern he's had, right, of hurting girls, especially not with her. So, they talk about it, and it gets to a thing. And she feels really bad about it, and he feels really bad about it, and they do talk about it, but it's still kind of like this, why didn't you kiss me? Why would you not kiss me? So anyway, there's that. And then we have the scene where Brooke tells Adrian about her own addiction, which she's still obviously trying to come to terms with, and she's going to therapy for this, and she, throughout almost the entire book, doesn't want to talk to her therapist about anything because she doesn't want to admit that there's anything wrong with her. But eventually so what happens is they go looking for costumes for the pageant because Adrian has decided if he's got to play Santa Claus, she's going to play Mrs. Claus, which is really cute. So they go looking around, and he tells her, there's this really cute scene where he tells her about how his favorite book as a kid was Le Chandail d'Hockey, or The Hockey Sweater by Raquelier. And then she tells him about, what happened and why she, I think because she mentioned something about she wishes she could just get rid of all her costumes, and he wants to know why. So she tells him about how she didn't make it in, which I think he knew already, and how she did try to OD on her stimulants, and it didn't work, obviously. And then so he knows about it, which leads into the climax, like they said. And then, of course, later he sends a letter to Ellie, and which is a really sweet thing. He writes the letter you can read there, and then she calls him back, and she's like, thank you so much for that. He's like, thank you. And she's like, yeah, because that really, it gives me some closure, right? So there's that. And then, after that, there is that scene. Adrian and Brooke decide they're going to do a little show at a festival, and they do. And that whole scene wasn't just for I didn't write that just that they could have a chance to show people what they're doing. I wrote it because he refused to go to a festival with Ellie and rethought it and thought, no, I'm going to be better this time. I'm going to be better than I was beforehand. And I don't know if you've noticed this theme with the rest of the books, but that is a common theme that, we think back and we go, I made a mistake once before. I'm not going to make the same mistake again. And I think that's a huge thing in this book, is that they're constantly thinking back on the mistakes they've made and trying to do different, trying to do better. So he does take her there, and it's really good. And then, of course, there is that scene where they do kiss for the first time, and again, it's a case of I really shouldn't mess it up this time. And she goes, should I let him? And of course, Adrian's cute, so she's not gonna not. But also, I think they like each other a lot. So I don't know. I'll have to ask them. So anyway, there's that. And then, of course, I couldn't leave the story alone without bringing Red and Zara back into it, because, as you know, Red is the MVP of the series. He's a fan favorite, and I had to contrive a way to get him into this book because I love him so much. But also, I really like the way it turned out. I like that he acted like he didn't want to and was very reluctant, but and saying that like, oh, I'll do it for Zara, not for you. But I think based on some of the things that Red says to Adrian, we really see that Red kind of relates to Adrian, and he does specifically say like, hey, I'm best friends with the guy I used to bully, and I used to do all kinds of terrible things. And he even says like, you and I aren't that different. And I have actually I skipped one of my quotes. There's a really cute one, but I'll just skip it. But I mean, I have this quote from Red where he says near the end of the book, because I really love this. After offering to give him another black eye, after offering to do a whole bunch of stuff. Oh, he says, we're not so different, you know. It's not hard to be a jerk, but it takes a strong man to be better than that. And I love that quote. I know I wrote it, but I love it still. So I think that's really important. I think it's important for Red to be able to move on, to be able to recognize that, but also for him to pass that along to Adrian is a really neat thing. So, but that's after the big climax of the story. So the big climax of the story, of course, is that Brooke's doing really well, but as we know, with with a lot of mental health disorders or issues, you can have ups and downs, and some days you're doing really well, and other days something just sets you off. So for some reason, she decides that like she thinks everybody's going to be better off without her. She sees that people are doing well, and something just really sets her off. So she decides she's going to like run away. And by the way, if you are going to run away, probably don't do it in a blizzard. Because the thing that ultimately, I mean, it's funny to me, not like ha ha ha, but like ironic and a little bit funny that, you know, she's in there, she's driving. Most people, by the way, that live up north like that, they don't care that much about driving in a snowstorm, but still, don't run away in a blizzard. But anyway, she's driving, and she freaks out because she thinks that she forgot her skates, and she looks back and she does have her skates. And then she realizes like, well, what am I even running away from if I'm taking my skates, which are like her whole life, with me? Like that's, so that's the thing that makes her turn around. And of course, roads get icy and she wipes out on the road. And then Adrian and Red and Zara find her, and when they do, the EMS arrive, and he mentions something about it possibly not being an accident, which of course is a big deal to her, because I mean, I can understand him being concerned, and I understand why he would say that, but also maybe he should have kept that to himself until he had spoken to like maybe her mom or somebody else instead of the EMS. So there's this whole thing about like now Brooke's got to be cleared mentally with her therapist. But also that scene is really important too, because even when she's having this conversation with Rosa, her therapist, she tells her about how like, you know, because she's like, I really want out here. I just want to go and do my skating. That's all I really love and care about. And that is good enough for me. But also she admits that. She says, I know that I'm always going to feel this way. I know I'm always going to have these issues. But I have to be okay with that. And you have to be okay with that. And I am trying better. So I love that moment. I think that's really important for her to come to terms with that on her own. Because again, it's not about falling in love. It's about dealing with your issues the best you can and being in love despite that. So yeah, there's that. And of course, Adrian comes to apologize, and she doesn't really need an apology, but she needs to know that he trusts her and she can trust him. So yeah, so there's that whole thing. And then of course they do their pageant, which I really love. I think it's really cute. The whole thing is adorable. I did this like mishmash of like different Christmas lore. Anybody who knows me knows that I absolutely love Christmas. Like I just love it. So of course I had all these like I had the Christmas story, and then I had like Santa Claus, and I had like Red and Zara were reindeer, and yeah, and even Red's like, this is so weird, and Zara's like, shut up and just do it. So yeah, that's the whole book. You may have noticed that I left a lot of things very open-ended. I did that on purpose. not because I didn't want you to feel like it was incomplete or unfinished, but because I like the idea that characters can live on in your mind afterwards. So we have a couple of like looser ends. I don't want to call them really loose, but I mean, I even did this with the B-boy. With the B-boy, and I didn't really talk about it in my B-boy video, but I left it open as to whether or not Red would continue dancing, and we actually find out in this book that he does, and he and Zara are working together. So in Outside Edge, Adrian says, maybe I'll go to school next fall, and because he's stuck for a year there, or he's supposed to be, and she says, maybe I will try out for the Olympics again, or maybe I'll just do this here. And at the end, we see she's training the kids, and he's starting a hockey team, which she suggested to him. I think that's cute too. And they're doing that for now. And I think it's clear that they're probably going to be together for a long time, despite what life choices they're going to make from now. And that was the part that I wanted to feel finished, that like they know that they're in love, even if they didn't say I'm in love with you, but they know that they're in love. That's a thing that probably won't change, whereas anything else I think they can handle. I also had that sort of side story between his grandfather, Pops, and Marie, and it's clear that Maria likes Pops, but Pops is still not over the death of his wife, which happened a couple of years ago. But at the end of the story, he gave her some roses, and you can interpret that whatever way you want. Some people really like second chance stories, but I also understand why he says very specifically, just because somebody dies doesn't mean your love for them dies, right? So that's another part of it. And then, of course, we have Brooke's mom and Dawson. She says Dawson's way too young for me, but I don't know. There could be a thing there. So another open end that I just left open. Another open end was just Adrian's parents, which we have known since Knockout Girl that they're separated, but not divorced and not really seeing other people, but they could, they might not. We don't know. They got along well enough to come visit, and that was that. So yeah, I left a lot of open ends because I felt like it was better that way. And again, I like the idea that your characters, or my characters, will live on after the story. So yeah, so there's that. So tell me if I missed anything. I'm looking at my list, like I probably missed something. I didn't really talk about Adrian and his grandfather, and of course Adrian's had a close relationship with his grandfather despite the 5-hour time travel. The 5-hour distance for traveling between where they live, he had a good relationship with his grandfather when he was younger. And of course now things are different because Adrian's growing up making a lot of stupid mistakes, but still growing up. And I think at the end of the story, Pops really realizes that he is trying better and he is doing better. And also Adrian realizes that his grandfather is getting older and he's alone. And whether you want to call that an excuse or a very nice thing he's doing, but it makes him want to stay, not just for Brooke, but also for his grandfather. So there's that. I also didn't mention Lorenzo. I told you there's so many things in this book, but there's that thing with like Marie's, because I really love this. Her late husband was also a skater, and he had these new skates, and she gave them to Adrian, and I think that's a really sweet gesture. There's a lot of stuff in this book. I'm probably missing something else. If I miss something, let me know. I have to cut this video off soon because it's getting really long, but there was a lot of stuff that I loved in the book that I thought was important to write about, and I think it's important to read about. And I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you. I know that the people who have left me some reviews and have read it have told me that it was really great, and it really deals with some of these topics in a nice, gentle way. So if you're looking for something like that for anybody that you know, feel free to pick up a copy for them. All right. Thank you. My next video is going to be the last one of the series, and it's a really great one, I have to say myself. So we'll be back next time with Hooked. Bye.